give it a couple more minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Thank you guys all for attending today's session on homelessness in the school system. Just a couple of reminders before we get started. Please keep your cameras and your microphones off during today's presentation. Also, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box and I will relay them to our presenter as we go along. Lastly, if you need a certificate of participation, you need to email Maryland at the end of today's presentation. And also, again, our surveys will be sent out after the presentation. Please take the 1 or 2 minutes that it takes to fill out. Any and all feedback is great for us, possible topics for the future. So we really appreciate you just taking that 1 or 2 minutes to fill those out. So with that, I will turn it over to Charisse.
Thank you, Kylie. So this is weird because I can't see myself or anybody else. So I just feel like I'm talking to my screen. But so basically, oh, there we go. What's that? There, thank you. All right, so I'm here today to talk about what we call the hidden homeless amongst our youth. Everything I talk about today is experiences that we are having here right in Bismarck, Mandan area. We're not talking about Chicago or Minneapolis or anything like that. So these things are happening here. As landlords, I would think that you obviously see that as well. And then just also a disclaimer that there might be some things in here that you don't agree with, or maybe you've experienced it in such a different way because you're kind of on the other side of things. I respect that. And I hope that you will have an open mind when we're talking about some scenarios or different things in regarding tenants and their situations. I've done this long enough to know that there's always two sides. And so I am not naive and I don't believe everything that I am told by either party. It's usually somewhere in the middle. And so, but I just need you to know that my job, which we'll go through here in a second, the biggest part of my job is being an advocate for these families and mostly an advocate for those youth because they don't tend to have a voice in any situation. So if you have any questions, like she said, please go ahead and ask them as we go. Don't wait till the end if you feel comfortable. And if not, you can always email me afterwards if you have certain questions or would like me to meet with you or an organization to explain some things as well. So, all right. So this is just a little bit about myself. I am the Bismarck Public School District Liaison. I've been a social worker for 22 years, and I've been working in this position. It'll be 7 years in January here. So the background of all of my work has been working with at-risk families and youth. And so it has been in the juvenile justice system. It's been in school systems. I also work for the county. So I kind of have a broad range of background and know the system, which can be pretty frustrating as a worker these days. But that's kind of where my experience comes from, is everything working with families and youth. So my position here, basically I work for all 25 schools in the Bismarck Public School System. So we used to have 23, but now we have 2 new elementary schools. And so now we're at 25. I also work with the 0 through 5 age range. We are asked to try and identify as many as we can that are considered to be homeless in that group. And then we also can serve kids up until the age of 21. And that includes if they are, if they drop out of school, or because of all of the transitioning, their credits, they just don't have a lot of credits, and maybe they're already 20 years old, and the GED is the best way. We do support them as well. So basically 0 through 21 are the age ranges that I work with. My biggest part of my job is to identify those students and those families, and then connect those families with resources throughout our community. And then I want to connect those students with services to assist in their day-to-day education, to make it the best and safest experience for them, and so that they can experience it just like anybody else. And that because of financial means, they aren't able to participate for some reason. We just want them to be able to have that same school experience as everybody else. So if you want to enter in the chat, how many youth in the Bismarck area, that does not include Mandan, were identified last year in the school year for being homeless? So if you want to just throw some numbers in the chat. I don't know, can I see the chat? Maybe, no.
365. 450, 150, 111, 1800, 150, 500, 220, 400.
So here's the, okay, that's why I can see the chat. Okay, so 384 was last year for Bismarck Public Schools. And we'll look at the trend that has been, but that is students that were identified or considered to be in transition. And that is probably, you know, half of the number that are really actually out there. We don't identify each one just because A, I'm only one person, and B, sometimes they are super hard to find because they're not honest about their situation. So that's the number. A lot of people think that's a big number. That's actually, we're on the low end of things, of how things have been progressing. How do I get that thing out of there? Get out of here. I don't want you. Oops, sorry, now I'm going back. Hold on. Okay. So what does 384 mean, or what does that look like as far as a definition? So the definition for homeless under the McKinney Vento homeless federal law is that children who are in lack of a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime resident. So if they don't know, or it's a guessing game of where they're going to lay their head at every night, it's not on a regular basis. And is it adequate? So adequate is probably a huge term, and it can be used at everybody's discretion on what adequate means. So, you know, if you think adequate is sleeping on the couch with a blanket and pillow, while there's a party with alcohol and drugs going on in the same room. If you think that's adequate, then I guess it's adequate. But my adequate is not that. And so we have to kind of look at also, can those basic needs be met? So if a student is staying with another family, is there enough food to go around? Do they have access to wash their clothes? Do they have access to hygiene products? Do they have you know, a good place to sleep? So those kinds of things, when we look at that word adequate, is how we try to determine if they really are considered in transition or homeless. If kids are located in hotels and motels, basically because they can't find, maybe they have felonies and they can't find landlords that rent to them. Maybe they have credit problems, so they won't pass the credit background. Sometimes it's because, you know, they can pay them day by day or week by week. And if they're working on like for a temp agency, they don't always know what their income is going to be every day. So they can stay there day by day. And there are also places that don't ask for those background checks or, you know, their credit report or things like that. They don't ask them if they are sex offenders or if they have the means to pay for it, or if they are hiding out from law enforcement. or social services. And so sometimes those are the places that they end up going. Campgrounds. So in the fall, when I come back from summer break, we go to the campgrounds in town and talk with the workers there to see if have any known families that are staying there, that have maybe they've paid for a month, or maybe they've been there all summer and now, there's no that they're going to, there's no something that's saying that they're going to leave soon. And so then we try to find those families and just make sure their kids are registered for school, if they're going to be here when school starts, and then get them set up for registration and backpacks and school supplies and those kinds of things. Any child that's in an emergency or transitional shelter, so that would be the United Way, Welcome House, the AARC shelter, even transitional living places. So if they're in a sober living environment, or in apartments that are for treatment, if they are in treatment, if they are a youth that is in a transitional shelter or home, which means we have youth works in town and they have apartments that they rent out, or that they have for kids from, I think they're 18 to 24, that they work with them on getting their own place, but they can stay there until the time being. Those are considered transitional. Anything that's temporary would be considered fall under the definition. And then there's the substandard housing. So anything that's not designed for a person to live in. So that would be storage units, garages, under stairwells in hotels. We've, had people stay above, let's say maybe like a mechanic's garage is on the bottom, and then there's a living quarters quotations up on top. But the living quarters doesn't have running water, doesn't have heat. So is that really adequate? It's basically a roof over their head, and that's about it. So obviously if they're in their cars, or, sometimes going back to the campground, we, especially during the oil boom, a lot of people owned campers that were, nicer than my own home. And, they had sold their home and this was their home, and that's, they were staying here and working in the oil field. Those would not be considered under the program. But if they are living in a camper and they pull that camper around to street by street and park by park in town here, so they don't get in trouble, or live in their car and do the same, or a van, then they would obviously be under the program. And then doubled up, which I'm sure most of you have come across that situation where one family is living with another family due to economic or financial hardship. And so that usually means they were evicted, or maybe those scenarios I gave with the hotels, their credit's bad, they have felonies, they can't find a place to stay, those kinds of things. And so they're supposed to be temporary with another family. Sometimes that ends up being a lot longer than them or I anticipate them staying there. And then we have unaccompanied youth, and that's basically a child that does not live with their biological parents. They're staying with somebody, a guardian or a caregiver that is taking them into their house. And so they are physically there, but there's no custodial paperwork, guardianship, nothing through a court system that would say that the people they are staying with have any kind of jurisdiction or rights or anything like that over them. And so if grandma has a child with her, but she has custody paperwork from the tribe or from the district court, they're not in the program, because that's considered temporary when they get something from a court system and a judge signs off on it. Even if it says temporary guardianship, that's still a legal document. And so it's permanent until something happens and they have to go back into court to get it changed. So those are kind of the definitions that we go about through the education system on if you are in transition. And so I talked about McKinney Vento. That is the federal law that actually protects the students who are in transition. It's through the school systems, and so it has to do with their education. So we don't want, a lot of these kids are moving a lot, they're transitioning a lot, and so they're stopping and starting schools sometimes up to 6 times a year in places. And so they're losing credit, and they're losing that learning stability that one really needs in order to be able to function correctly in the education system. And so we want to try and provide as much stable environment that we can. And so the biggest purpose of McKinney Vento would be if a child in Bismarck would start up north at a school, and then their family's evicted and now they're staying down with grandma until they can figure things out down in the south part of town. We don't want to have to move that kid now to the south part of town because we don't want to have to move schools in case they end up back up on the north side. So we try to help them out as best as we can, getting services as far as if they need transportation, but we allow them to maintain in that school for that remainder of the year. So they're not being pulled different schools and having to start and restart. So it's basically all about the stability in their educational system.
Therese, we have a question.
Yeah.
What if the child is 17? Is that considered a child? What if mom is making him live on his own?
So an unaccompanied youth is anybody under 18 that's not living with their biological parents. So if mom is saying, basically, I'm tired of your crap and I want you out, and he's 17 or she's 17, by law, they are considered an unaccompanied youth, unless mom would give some kind of rights through a court system to whomever they're staying with. If they're just bebopping around from friend to family to whatever, then they would be an unaccompanied youth and they would qualify for the services in the program that I run. The thing with the unaccompanied situation there, it's a very gray area. You have the cultural background sometimes, like in our Native population, that's culture, that's family takes care of family. And so sometimes you have 3 families living in a house and that's how they want it. They choose it to be like that because that's how they were raised. And so those don't necessarily qualify for our programming. If it's been something that's planned, where they say we're all going to get a place together, or if mom lives in New Salem, I'm just picking places, but wants her kid to come to Bismarck for a better education, more opportunities. And so that kid's going to come and stay with uncle and aunt here in town. That's planned. That was a decision they made. It didn't have anything to do with where they were living as far as their residence, if they lost that or it wasn't temporary. So they would not be underneath the program. If there was no paperwork involved, they still by law would be unaccompanied, but just not receiving services of the program.
She followed up with a kind of a statement. Mom is living with boyfriend and he's alone in a house. So he's not homeless, but no one is with him ever. It's a small town. So the town is aware. Right.
So obviously, social services would be where they should get involved there, because that's a supervision issue, that's abandonment issue on mom's part. And so that would be actually going down the route of getting the county social services involved, or making not a complaint, but filing a report saying, hey, we're concerned about this young man, taking your young lady, taking care of themselves. They're in that house by themselves all the time. And that would be the route to go, but they definitely would fall under, because that's not their house. Like the house is not in their name, I'm assuming. It's in mom's name or whomever's name. And so unless that child took over that lease and then it was put in their name, which they're underage, so they can't, then they would still be in a temporary housing kind of a situation, even though it's mom's housing. There's a conflict there. And so they would be an unaccompanied youth for sure. Okay. This is what we just talked about, the unaccompanied youth, that physical custody, them not being with mom or dad. And like I said before, we recognize the cultural things that can happen. About, we have a lot of people that come from Guam or the Congo, and kind of the same thing, where they're used to sleeping on, basically on the ground with a thin blanket sometimes. And so coming into a house and having to sleep on the couch is like, okay, I mean, it's acceptable to them. But they come under the program because they have no income. They've maybe come here and they don't have a job. And so for financial reasons, they are also staying with family. And so until they can get their own place, those children would fall under the program. Like I said, unaccompanied youth is a huge, it's like a rabbit hole. Once you kind of start talking about situations, you could talk about them all day. And it's kind of at the discretion of that liaison that's having those conversations. And so that's why it's my job to ask those questions. Maybe there was abuse mom was abusing the child. And so the child just left and went to stay with some friends. And those friends are like, yeah, you can stay here as long as you want. Because of that conflict and that child not feeling safe, other than social services trying to be involved or should be involved, that's an unaccompanied youth as well. They don't care what the situation is, if it was the parent that kicked them out or if the child left because they didn't feel safe in the home. Those also fall under the unaccompanied youth. And so right now I say right now, but it's been for years now, but up, in Congress, the definition crisis, meaning, those 5 kind of criteria I gave you, how kids qualify to be in transition, that's from Department of Education. And so obviously we have HUD and their definition, kind of is the same spinoff, individual family who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, but they have a primary nighttime residence that is public or private. So that does not include people who are living in a hotel, or those unaccompanied youth, or even families who are doubled up. Or is living in a privately operated shelter. So if they're in the shelter, we can't count them either. So some might ask, well, what's the big deal? They're kind of the same. But when it comes down to being able to get services for these families through HUD, their definition is different, because they're saying, well, you don't meet this standard because you are living in a shelter. You actually have a roof over your head, so you're fine. Or you are living with another family, so you're fine. The part about, being in a doubled up situation, or really any of these situations, is the fact that it's considered temporary housing. Like, they don't have teeth in the game as far as if somebody says, you got to get out today, they can't fight back. I mean, they can, but they have nothing to stand on. This actually happened the first year I was here. I had a mom come into the school when she dropped off her child, and she was very upset, emotional. The social worker called me to the school. I went and talked to the mom, and she said that she had been staying with her sister because she had left her husband a couple months previously due to some abuse. And so her and her kids had moved in with her sister and had been living there for, a couple months. And she was, paying her what she could, when she could, kind of a thing. And then that morning, her sister kicked them out and said they had until noon that day to get all their stuff out. And she said the only thing that happened this morning was that my son burnt his toast in the toaster. And she was complaining how it made her house smell. And so I am sure there's things that added up that had happened previously to that, but that's the one thing that's going to stick in that kid's mind, that because I burnt the toast, I got my family kicked out. And so also in everybody else's mind about how simple that something like that could just cause her to go, overboard because of all this stuff maybe leading up to it. And them not having that communication or conversation about it, and then just telling her she had to leave. And she had to leave. I mean, it wasn't her place. She didn't have anything, even though she had been giving her some money. There's nothing in a document that says, that she can stay there. And so that's these situations that, that we talk about. And then obviously the resistance up in Congress is because, if we broaden that definition for HUD a little bit, where we maybe gel it with the education definition and kind of come to a compromise, that's going to open it up to more people. And now more people are going to need services, which costs money. And so that's where I think the big roadblock is that they don't know how they would be able to provide all of these services to these newly qualified people because of that new definition. So. And this is just the stability we talked about, that McKinney Vento, that's the main reason why it came it came up in the legislature and why it became a federal mandate and the federal law. So you ask, well, how do you find these kids, or how do you know that these kids are, in transition? And so it's a process. Sometimes, if we can immediately get them with registration. So we have a system where all of our registration is online for school. And there are 3 to 5 questions that if they answer yes to any of them regarding their residence and their home, it gets kicked over to me. Or if they're not able to provide, so Bismarck, because we don't have open enrollment with Mandan or any other surrounding school, we have to have 2 items of residence, either resident affidavit or 2 items saying that, verifying where your address is. So a bill, a mortgage, a lease, those kinds of things. They can't provide those, then we know that maybe there's a different situation going on. And so then I initiate that conversation with the family. They're not always honest. And so sometimes it might take a little bit for us to figure out what's going on. Maybe they tell us that this is their place and that this is, yep. But then they can't provide that documentation. And so then we kind of talk to them about it. We cannot deny any child enrollment based upon their residence or their status when it comes to if they're being homeless or, those kinds of things. And so if they come in and say, we don't have a lease, we don't have this, I don't have the birth certificate, I don't have this, I don't have that, because we left in the middle of the night from South Dakota and we just came here. We have to register them and we can work on that paperwork later. But we cannot deny any child enrollment for any reason like that. No matter what our district policy is, that's the federal policy for kids who are considered in transition. Shelter involvement. So I get contacted by the shelters in town when they get a family. They tell me, this is the name of the family, this is how many kids they have, and if I have to help register, I will. Or if they've already registered, or maybe they're already students of Bismarck and they were living somewhere and then something happened and now they have to live in the shelter. So we need to make sure that they can remain in their school and that we can get them to and from school. And that program that we provide does offer transportation to make that happen. And we talked about the hotel and campground referrals. Agencies that I work with really closely, social services, youth works, who work with a lot of runaway youth and get a lot of families in their shelter over there. They contact me. The Mandan School Liaison and myself are pretty good friends. We talk all the time about families going back and forth. They'll do that multiple times during the year sometimes. And so it's just nice for us to be able to communicate and keep track of them to make sure that they are registered in a school and that they are getting there. And then obviously, my counterparts, the social workers in the schools, any kind of school staff, principals, counselors. But I do want to say that the meat of the operation are people like our secretaries in the schools, our bus drivers, lunch ladies, because these are people that the children might say something to or will talk to another student in front of, because they don't feel like there's an administration component to it. Like, what's the lunch lady going to do, right? So I'm going to talk about me sleeping on the floor, or that I haven't eaten and whatever. And so can you give me your extra bread so I can put it in my bag, kind of a deal. On the bus, they have conversations all the time. And we know how kids, especially younger ones, are, when they talk very loudly. And so if they start talking and sharing with somebody about their current situation, and the bus driver overhears that, the secretaries, they are the hub. They are queen bee, and I love them to death. They can give me sometimes information I don't need to know, but if I would call and ask about, did Sally Sue make it to school today? And if they say, oh, she did, and she came in a red car and there was a guy driving and I've never seen that guy before, because usually it's mom that drops him off, and they start giving you all of this information. It's kind of comical sometimes, but that information is super helpful to us when we're trying to make sure that these kids are in a safe environment and that, we can make sure we can get them to and from school. So that's kind of how I find out about all of these kids throughout the entire school year. So right now, let's see, what's my next slide? Yeah. Okay.
We do have
So-
some questions.
Oh, okay, sorry. I don't have my chat open, so I can't see it.
No,
So,
that's fine.
okay.
First one, what about squatters' rights? How does that play into that scenario?
Well, so for squatters' rights, I'm assuming that that is only for like 18 and over. So children, I wouldn't necessarily call them squatters per se. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying they would be under that unaccompanied youth, and then that's when social services has to come in. I am not familiar with when you're an adult and you're squatting, and if you have kids and you're in a place. I mean, obviously it's not their place. I mean, we've had some families where they're in a place that they're not supposed to be because maybe mom went to jail and she has a trailer, and they know that she's going to be gone for 3 months, and so maybe auntie and the kid are staying in there, and then through whatever happens, whether it's the trailer court or somebody, we find out that they're there, and they usually end up getting removed for some reason. So I don't have a lot of experience with that per se. Oh, sorry, that's my radio with my driver. Sorry. So yeah, I hope that. Is there other questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'll just ask it. If they
Yeah.
receive mail or have been for 2 weeks, does a formal eviction have to take place?
Say that again.
If they receive mail or have been for 2 weeks, does a formal eviction have to take place?
So if you're saying they receive mail there for over 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So my experience, again, I'm on the opposite side of where you guys are. So, and you guys obviously know what the proper procedures are and things like that for that. But my experience with evictions is when somebody calls me and says I've been evicted, I have to dig deeper because sometimes it's the 30-day notice. So I've always been told that there has to be a 30-day notice in order for them to be fully evicted. Now, whether that's true or not, that's a conversation that we can have towards the end here because I left some time. But that's what I've always been told. Now, I've had families come to me and say, I have a 3-day eviction notice, I have to get out. And then when I start asking questions, to come to find out that they had the 30-day eviction, they didn't show up to their hearing, and so now they have the 3 days, obviously. And so there are different situations with the eviction piece. I'm not sure what the statute is as far as if they're receiving mail at a specific place for a long period of time. I don't know that because I have a lot of families who are homeless, but they have grandma in town, but grandma, because of their shenanigans, won't let them stay with her, but she's allowing them to have their mail sent there because maybe they get, checks or, specific mail if their child has a medical condition or those kinds of things where they need to have just a place to get their rent. They can't afford a post office box. So I do know I've had families for multiple years have that as their mailing address, but yet they're not there because grandma won't let them. So I don't know if that answers.
And then one more.
Mhm.
Do parents get upset when you go to the campground if people are living there?
Do the parents of the people I'm talking to? Is that what it means? Like if I go to the campground and then I ask them and they say, yeah, lot 3 has a family there. Are you saying those parents?
Right. So I'm just wondering if parents, when you go to the campground and then the workers are saying, yeah, lot 3,
Yeah.
then you go talk to those families.
Yep.
What are the parents' reactions when you show up?
Sometimes, I mean, it can vary. Some people are pretty turned off by it and they're like, no, we're fine. We don't, they're just kind of, but I always go an approach of, we were told that you guys have been here for this amount of time and school's coming up. And so I was just wondering if you guys were going to be here for school. Is your child registered? Do you need help with that? We have a program as well that could maybe help with other things like school supplies and stuff. So I just wanted to check in and see, and sometimes I just have to leave my card because they don't really know how to answer to me. I don't ever tell people I'm a social worker because that's, they don't want to give me any information then, but sometimes I just leave my card there and then, sure enough, they'll call after. But there are some that are just very like, nope, we're fine. We don't, yep, they're registered. Yep. And they want to be left alone. And so unless I see something of concern, then I have to respect that.
That is it for right now.
Okay. So as you can see the trend here, for us, I don't think I put the, oh yeah, 384. Okay. So, the biggest, was right before COVID, we had 514 in the program, and that's the largest we've had since the program started. And so you can see there's the trickle down. So there's 415 and 384 of last year. So everybody's like, oh, great, homelessness is going down. Well, that's not the case. It's basically because we couldn't find those kids during and after COVID. A lot of them went to homeschooling, which my program doesn't cover that. So we can't identify them when they're being homeschooled. A lot of them moved around so much that we lost track of them. We couldn't, they went to a different district or those kinds of things. And so it was really hard to identify them. So it wasn't that things were getting better. It was just that things were getting harder for us to try to find them. Currently now, I was going to check before, but I forgot. But the other day when I checked, I'm close to 200 right now. And so normally I hit 200 at Christmas or that first of the year. So I'm ahead of schedule on the 200. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to like full bore ahead and be in the 600s. It just means that we've had like our influx right now, and maybe it'll go down a little bit, but usually that Christmas time after the new year, January, February, we see a lot of evictions because families have actually used any money that they have for Christmas and those kinds of things, and not for their rent. And so then at that point, then they end up getting evicted. So this is just some data from all over North Dakota. I just pulled these this morning. So this is from last year's school year. You can kind of see how things look across, obviously the bigger school districts. Bismarck is the largest school district in North Dakota. And so we can see Fargo and West Fargo and all those, they're separate. And so you can see where the trends are. I know that Dickinson and that Dickinson number has gone down tremendously, since now we've kind of got that lapse in the oil. Williston's still pretty high if you think about how big Williston is, that's still pretty high because there's still, even though the oil is, I think it's going up, but they still have a lot of people up there. And if you think about all of the different situations, living situations up there, their numbers are probably from now on are going to stay in those 200s for that town size, I guess you could say. So I just wanted to portray to you, what a life of a student in transition might look like. Obviously, everyone's different. Kids are resilient. And so sometimes we don't know anything that's going on. We can't tell that it's bothering them, but these are the things that they, on a daily basis, have to think about. And they might wake up and they don't really remember right away where they're at or who they're staying with. And then, are they going to get breakfast at this place? And if they get breakfast at school, are they going to get to school on time to get that breakfast because they stopped serving at a certain time? Do they have clean clothes to go to school? Hygiene products, do they have any of those things so they can look presentable or feel presentable when they go to school? So their anxiety is already really high, just kind of thinking about those things. And then it's about, did you even sleep? Was there loud partying going on while you were trying to sleep? Were you being moved constantly throughout the night to make room for other people? Did you have enough blankets? Did you, were you those all of those things, about that night, they're waking up the next morning and having that anxiety about, so then when they get to school, they're sleeping through class because they haven't been able to sleep. They either eat all of their lunch or they try and hoard it. So they can take some home later. Obviously, anxiety causes stomach aches and pains from either malnourishment or the anxiety about thinking about who's going to pick me up, where are we going to go, are we going to get supper, where are we going to stay tonight, am I going to be able to go to my choir concert tomorrow, am I going to be able to take a shower or bathe, people are teasing me. And the biggest one is, am I going to be safe? Because if they've been in places where multiple people are staying and it's in a living area, like a living room, or even in a a bedroom, is somebody coming in there and violating them or causing some abuse of some sort? So are you going to be safe? And so that one's on their mind constantly throughout the day. And so sometimes when we wonder why kids act out, or kids are sleeping all day, or kids kind of look disheveled, not every kid that's disheveled is a homeless kid. But sometimes we have to think about what they're going through in their little minds every day. And then families, so parents that I meet with, these are all of the things that, that they talk about when they finally talk to me about the situation where they're at. Obviously, they can be ashamed and embarrassed. They're fearful of not being able to provide for their family. Is social services going to be called? Are they going to take my kids away? They're exhausted from keeping up, everything and trying to think about solutions. They're obviously angry and have all the anxiety. They have that lack of control. They feel like they can't control what's going to happen to them or their kids. They're hungry themselves. And then they feel at a deep loss. And so, we think about the basic needs being met. And so if you don't have the food and the water and the shelter and those kinds of things, you think about when you have pneumonia, or if you've had COVID and you had a hard time with it, when you were down and out and you were in bed and you could not get out of bed because your body ached so bad and your headache hurt so bad because you were dehydrated, and were you thinking about getting up and going to a job interview or meeting with social services to talk about, eligibility or Medicaid or Medicare or whatever it is? Probably not. And so sometimes when these parents aren't getting their basic needs met, they really can't think outside the box. They're just surviving. They're thinking about right here in front of their nose and what they can reach. And they can't set goals. They can't think about this. They can't think about that because they're just thinking they're in that survival mode. And so they feel desperate. So what are they going to do? Do they have to start stealing stuff? Do they have to start lying to family members, borrowing money? So maybe they become reckless, but maybe they're doing it so they can provide for their family. Obviously, then there's illegal activity. Do they sell some drugs so they can just get some quick cash? They hide things. And so those are kind of all of the things that when I work with families that I see them go through just on a daily basis. Okay, so this next thing, I want to just put this up here. It's a kind of a trigger warning. Some of you might be have a lot of opinions about this, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the discussion about advocacy and relationships. So the advocacy piece is like on my end of things, and I just want to tell you experiences that I've had where families have come to me saying, I'm I'm $200 short this month for my rent, and my landlord told me if I don't get it by such and such, he's going to evict me or she's going to evict me. And so when I say, have you called some agencies? Have you reached out to organizations? And they say, yes, I have an organization, Community Action is going to pay the $200 for me. And so but he's not going to take that, or what, there's something where I have it, but they won't take it, or I don't, whatever the case may be. And so sometimes I'll have to make that phone call on their behalf to the landlord or to whomever to say, or maybe even to Community Action to say, hey, this is the family, I've been working with them, or I know the family or whatever. And kind of, I don't want to say vouch for them, but just kind of advocate on them receiving those funds. I don't do that for everybody. So I don't do that in every situation. And I don't, I do those on the ones where I feel like maybe they're being taken advantage of a little bit. Either by the landlord or the management company or whomever it is, because they're not going to fight back because they don't have anywhere else to go. And so as a landlord, that landlord was accepting in the beginning of, yep, you have a felony. Okay, I'll work with you on that. Yep, you're late on rent. I'll work with you on that. And then pretty soon it all adds up when it's every single month. And there's some noise complaints, or maybe there's some things that have happened where you've always had to constantly talk to them. And then now this is just kind of like the last straw. But on the other end of that, like that last straw might put them in very dangerous situations. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have boundaries and have rules and things like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just sharing it from my end of things, where that's why if I'm calling a landlord It's because I'm really advocating where I feel like if we get this family hooked up with some services, they'll be able to be successful, and maybe they weren't before. And so once we can get those caseworkers on board to help them budget money or help them get a job, maybe they didn't have a phone, so they couldn't put a phone number down, for a job interview or those. I mean, there's so many different things that can happen in their lives that are barriers for them, that if just maybe a couple roads were open for them, they could get through and get out on the other side. It's not every situation, but it's some of the situations. And I just wanted to have that kind of that discussion about, I have a lot of families that maybe feel like, and I have had experiences where they are being taken advantage of because the landlord knows that they're not going to fight back because, well, where are you going to go? Like, you got to pay this, or you got to take this increase in rent, because where are you going to go? Nobody's going to accept your credit. Nobody's going to do this. Nobody's going to do that. You're not going to qualify for housing. So, and they know that. And so they'll take advantage of that. And so just to have that conversation about that. And if anybody wants to comment or open up something, believe me, I've worked in this business long enough to know that what they're always telling me is not true. And sometimes I will, with their permission, call that landlord and they're telling me this, is that true? Sometimes they're like, no, that's not what I said at all. Or, yep, and this is why. And then they give me their background. Okay, now that makes sense, because sometimes they're coming in and all, in a tizzy. And so they're relaying bad information to me. And so then when I call and actually get the correct information, then I can maybe try and be that moderator of, okay, now this makes sense. And where can we go from here? And most landlords are very understanding. When I've called them, I've only had one that I've had to call the health department on. But other than that, they've been very open when I call and explain who I am and what I'm trying to do. And I'm not trying to fix it. I'm not trying to say, look away. But if we could come to some kind of compromise or something like that, they've been very good about it. So these are just the types of programs that the Students in Transition program through BPS offers. So we offer transportation. We have a van program where it's kind of serves as an Uber. But the only way to qualify for that is you have to be in this program, and then you can't have any means of transportation otherwise. So you can't have your own vehicle. You can't be able to get on busing. If you qualify for busing, you ride the bus. If you have another program that offers transportation, you're involved, like your family's involved with somebody and you have a parent aid and they're able to get you to and from school every day. This is strictly for people who don't have a license, don't have the means, they don't have a car, any way of getting you to and from school every day. These are the kids that we provide that transportation for. We can also help out with doctor's appointments and those kinds of things when it works out, because I don't have a driver all day long. I just have them in the morning and then afternoon after school. We pay off any negative lunch balances when they come into the program. If they have a negative lunch balance, we'll pay that off for them. And then they automatically get free breakfast and lunch when they come into the program as soon as they're identified. We pay fees for any kind of program. So if there's anything education-wise that they get a note saying, hey, Sally Sue is in art class and there's a $50 art fee. I take care of that. I talk with the principals, they waive the fee. And then if there's anything else that's needed along the way, the program can help provide for that. So athletic fees, those kinds of things, the program will help out with. And then we help pay for college application fees if needed. We help pay for housing application fees. And so if you come across, sometimes I have to contact the landlord because I'm paying for the $40 or $50 application fee for them to apply for the housing. And so I have to pay for it either on phone with a credit card, or they have to wait for a check, which takes a couple days here, but we do that as well. The GED testing, that costs money, so we'll pay for that. And when they get their, when they do their testing, we pay for anything graduation. So they want to be part of graduation, we'll get the cap and gown. We'll find a photographer for them for senior pictures, just so they can have that experience. Obviously, that advocation is big for my role. We also supply the school supplies, backpacks. We don't do a lot of clothing here just because we don't have the room for it. But we do have some winter apparel, and now the district has its own program that they can get any kid. They don't have to be in this program. Any kid, if they are in need of winter apparel, can go through their own school. We work with, the unaccompanied youth. So like in FAFSA, so if they want to go to college, but yet mom and dad kicked them out and they're 17 and they're living like with friends or whatnot, but they want to go to college, I write a letter along with their application saying that they are considered to be a student in transition and that they are not allowed to use their parents' income for that year's financial means. So when they're applying for grants and things like that, they won't use their parents' salaries. They will just say that they are a homeless child. And then obviously we, advocate, like I said before, about the school fees and things like that. And then all of these services, no matter what changes. So if a child comes into the program in November because they are in a shelter, and then in January they find their own place and now they have a permanent house because they have a lease and everything's in mom's name, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that their financial situation has miraculously gotten better. And we know that. And so we still keep all of those services in place for them until the end of that school year, just to kind of help them out a little bit more along the way. We talked about the school, if they go in the north to the south, we try and keep them in that one. We talked about the VAM program and how they qualify for that. And then another thing that comes along with McKinney Vento is our, policies. Normally, if they don't have the immunizations within the 30 days of enrolling, then we say, the school district says, you cannot come to school until you get those updated. Under McKinney Vento, we're not allowed to do that. It's a federal law. We cannot not provide them school education for that purpose. And that's just strictly because sometimes they are going from place to place to place, and either they haven't got the vaccinations or they have, and they don't remember what public health were they at when they got this one, and they can't get those records to verify that for us. So we can basically just help them if they're wanting to get those updated, provide transportation to the appointment, those kinds of things. And then, like I said before, we can never deny a student based upon not having the proper documentation. If a child comes in and a shady lady comes in and says, I'm her aunt and we moved here from Illinois and her mom knows she's here. Okay, that's a little shady, right? And so I'll ask for mom's phone number. I will, try to get a verbal at least over the phone. I'll talk to mom about the different kinds of documentation we have that she could fill out and just get it notarized so we know that it's okay for her to be here. And so that we try to check those things out when they come in, and it seems like we probably should, look into that a little bit more.
There is a quick question.
Okay. Yeah.
Which vaccines are you referring to?
So those are like the measles and I don't even know what the ones that are mandated. So we don't mandate the flu shot or the COVID or anything like that. So it'd be those ones usually when they're smaller that they have to get. And then there's a couple as you go, like when you come into kindergarten, obviously those ones, those vaccinations, they can opt out. There is the form that you opt out of it for religious or whatever reasons. So they have that option, but we just cannot deny them based upon those, not getting those. So my question, Kylie, is if I show this, are they going to be able to hear the sound? It's a short little.
We can try it. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't.
Okay. Can you hear it?
No. Somebody suggested, Chanel suggested if you go to YouTube and play it from there, it works better.
Are you not hearing it?
No.
Okay. I am on YouTube.
So maybe we can, if people want to go to the link, they can type in that link and check out the video.
Yes. All right. Now I got to go back and get my. Oh. Okay, where'd that go? How do I get this thing off of there? Can I move it? Oh, I just move it. Okay. Nope. There we go. Okay. That was just basically a little commercial about some kids. That's very kind of heart-wrenching, just to think about what they go through. But this is my information. If you have a family or families that are doubled up with each other that you know of, you can always give me a call and we can chit chat about them, and I can reach out to them and make sure, you know, as long as they're going to Bismarck Public Schools. If they're going to Mandan, then we would contact that liaison. Every school district is mandated to have a homeless liaison. So there would be somebody, you know, that's identified in each district that has like one of me in there. So we can always get them connected with the proper district. That's it.
All right. There's a couple, let me read through the chat here.
Second, okay.
Yes, we will. A couple people asked about that link. So we'll get that
Okay, yep.
link and we will add that to the email that will come out with the YouTube link. So we'll make sure both of those are on there.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. One of my friends was a SIT driver for a couple semesters and she absolutely loved it.
Oh, good.
Let's see. Can you share your PowerPoint? Sure.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we'll add that to the email as well, with the YouTube link, PowerPoint, and the link to that little video. Other than that, just lots of thank yous and good info and presentation. So
Great.
does anybody else have any other questions before we wrap up?
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I'm going to do, hold on. I'm going to do a really shameless plug. But one of the things we do in order, all those things that we talked about that we provide, we have to do some fundraising. And so we have a fundraiser. Of course, now I don't have. And it's going on now until the end of November, but it's basically calendar raffle tickets. Each ticket's $10 and you buy a ticket. And then there's 42 drawings on there. We draw the month of December and January, and every day pretty much that we're in school. And so 42 chances to win. Sometimes there's like $500, $80, anywhere, 300, those kinds of things. And so all of that money goes towards us being able to provide those services. We talked about paying for some athletic gear, maybe paying for a kid for a music instrument rental so they can be part of that, or if they need, you know, football shoes or whatever it is, that money is able to be used for whatever unique need each kid comes in with. So if you want to contact me to get some tickets or want to sell a book for me, just give me a holler.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sharice, for presenting today.
Yes.
Thank you again for everybody who attended. Marilyn just sent out the survey, so if you could just take a minute or two to fill that out, that would be great. Like I said earlier, any and all feedback is wonderful for us as we continue these trainings throughout the year. We will make sure we get the PowerPoint, the little video clip sent out with the YouTube link from the recording. So be on the lookout for that in the next couple days.
Tickets are $10 each. Somebody asked that, I think.
So we will make sure everything, there isn't a link for the survey. Okay, we'll double check everything, but be checking your emails for the survey and then PowerPoint and YouTube link. So thank you guys again for attending. Next week we have the Fargo Narcotics Task Force speaking on drug awareness. So hopefully you guys all can attend that. Thank you again, Sharice, and everybody have a good day.
Thank you.